At some level, I think everybody knows that we've been playing around with AI in various forms, as I'm sure everybody else here is. And one of the things that we kind of stumbled into was uh, a great way to use ChatGPT or Perplexity, or you pick them, is to create a scorecard. And scorecards are great, not just because of, some of you who are older like us may remember the balanced scorecard and kind of what a big hit that was back in the day from a book standpoint. But like, I'd forgotten kind of from my consulting days just how useful the scorecard can be. And so part of what we have been playing around with is that this particular use case, I think, as everyone is playing around with LLMs and AI, is that the more specific the use case, the easier it is to try to get value out of it versus just kind of wandering. And so we wanted to share kind of our learnings from that process and why we have found it valuable, how it's helped us, but also not only on category pirates, but also as in prior lives. I know Christopher has done scorecards as a CMO, probably as an advisor as well. I've done them for clients, and that we believe there's a real upside for folks creating them for, if you're an advisor, you can create them for a client. If you are a solopreneur, you can create them for yourself to do lead gen. If you are a creator, again, same kind of thing to be able to loop people into your process. So we wanted to share that and also to just kind of give you examples and some lessons learned along the way. So are we
Awesome.
still unable to invite Christopher up?
I just promoted him to a panelist.
Oh, there we
There
go.
he is. You've
And we
been
got
promoted,
Pirate Bean.
Christopher.
Fucking A. Yeah, Bean's ready to go. He's all fired up.
Awesome. I'm going to share my screen. We created just a simple deck for you all to kind of follow along and make it a little bit easier. So can everybody see this? Looks good. Eddie, can you see it?
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Let's see if I can run this thing. Welcome to Zoom. Okay, so just a quick overview. This is what we're going to cover today. We're going to walk through a little bit of why AI is important in business today, our thinking on it, how we're using it, what Eddie just kind of alluded to. We're going to walk through 7 steps that we took to build our AI scorecard. We've built a couple so far, but one we really built out and spent a ton of time on, like over 35 hours, involved multiple interns in doing it, had a ton of iterations. It took us about, what, Eddie, maybe a month and a half, 2 months
Mhm.
to perfect it. So we're going to walk through that with real examples and kind of walk you through that process. And then we're going to have a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A. So if you all have questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat, put them in the Q&A, and we'll be able to get to those kind of throughout the webinar in the chat. And then at the end, we'll answer them live. I also am going to share in the chat a link to our AI one-page strategy scorecard prompt. So this was kind of the culmination of what we created for our strategy therapy course. It basically allows you to take your one-page strategy, put it into AI using this prompt, and in seconds get a score. And it helps you understand what areas you can potentially improve, what areas might be, really strong in your one pager. So I'm going to send you all the link for that prompt with a quick like how to instruction video to use it while we're going through this. So you can kind of make sure you can access it as we're walking through exactly what we did to create it. So let's start off with Eddie. Do you want to kind of kick this off
Sure.
with the challenges that, people are facing in AI and why we're using it?
For sure. I think, the first part that Kat had, which was the power of AI. I think, I don't remember who to attribute it to. Christopher, you may know, but the whole idea of new technology tends to be overestimated in the short term and underestimated in the long run. And I think that's probably true of AI, is that there's a lot of fun stuff and excitement about it. And I know there's been some dead ends. We can talk about some of the kind of running the car into the light pole that we've had our own side of, just kind of like, whoops, we just wasted a lot of money on some AI use cases that were too new, too ready. And that this one in particular, we thought would be super helpful as in the manifest as a scorecard. And the scorecard being important because the scorecard is an age-old tool in business that you can use to run a business, that you can use to um, really codify knowledge that you have in your head. But also, I think practically speaking, for a lot of folks here, is to generate leads. at a zero cost CAC. And so that whole first bullet point is that getting expert knowledge and feedback is expensive, and that part of strategy therapy is trying to make that more accessible. Because it's easier for us to kind of help people at scale through the strategy therapy lens. But importantly, all of you have expert knowledge that we believe is resident in your heads that is kind of trapped there. And the only way you kind of get it out of there is to talk to somebody or write it out, or, probably basically it's a way you have to give time to get access to the expertise, and that can be expensive, or just, time consuming. And so what the scorecard does, it allows you to take your knowledge and winnow it down into something that people know that isn't exactly you. It's not the full value of you, but it's enough of you so that it helps them move forward. And so if you are an advisor or a creator, it also helps move people into the funnel further, and ultimately into your flywheel. So it's expensive to get access to knowledge. The scorecard makes it cheaper and scalable. Time consuming, obviously, to get access to, all the knowledge that Katrina's had, you got to make time. She has to make time. This kind of bends time. And that the important part, from a business problem standpoint, is, all of us at some level are selling something, and that the scorecard is an amazing lead gen perspective. And I know Christopher has some stories about that. Of, one of the things I've learned from Christopher, not being a software guy myself, is that every software company starts out as a service, and every great service, the best way to sell a service is through a diagnostic, and a scorecard is an amazing example of that. So,
The last point is the flywheel. I'm just getting everybody the link. So,
oh, okay. Yeah. Great.
okay. Christopher, anything you would like to add to that?
So I want to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. So there's a concept that's been used in business for a long time called a scorecard. And there's essentially, at a high level, two ways to use it. One is yourself internally, where you're trying to measure a set of things inside your own company. And what we're talking about here is what you, as a creator, as a marketer, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, can do using a scorecard as part of the marketing and sales cycle. And some companies call it an assessment. And there's an interesting thing that happens when you modify your sales cycle. When you move from selling your thing to selling an assessment about the work that you might do together. And it's sort of like Weight Watchers. I don't know if this is still the case, but back in the day, the first thing they did when you walked in was they put you on a scale. And so what a scorecard is if you think of your area of expertise, your different, your superpower, the problem that you and or your company solves, if you can create a diagnostic that's a scorecard as part of the marketing cycle that will build the economic case for why someone should buy your shit, you accelerate closing time and you materially increase your value. I'll give you a simple example. Our friends at Qualtrics, who went through the category design process with my brother from another mother, Al Ramadan, at Play Bigger and the team there, when they repositioned the company around a new category they were called experience management, they're moving from surveys to experience management. The purpose of a survey is to gain an insight into what kind of an experience someone's having with your company. And that was the leap from surveys to experiences. Okay, so what they did was they stopped selling experience management software, and they started selling experience surveys, experience assessments, aka scorecards. And all they did was they went in using their own technology to survey the senior executive team inside the company on a set of questions that they knew would give an accurate assessment as to what leaders in the company believed was successful and not successful in the way they were delivering experiences. And that generated a scorecard, which was the basis for the ROI/economic environment for buying the software. Our friends at Clary do the same thing. They are in the revenue management space. And they were the company that created the category of RevOps. And now they're pioneering revenue management across the entire enterprise. Well, what do? The problem they solve, they language it as revenue leak. Well, what do they do in their sales cycle? They could traditionally sell software, or their sales cycle isn't about selling software. All they're doing is selling a revenue leak assessment, a scorecard, a set of questions that a salesperson can ask a customer that will give the customer an insight into how severe, in this case, the revenue leak problem is. And so what's our point? If we stop using AI to generate fucking meaningless content-free content, which is what most marketers do. Write me a story about 5 key marketing tips for startups. And ChatGPT pukes out some pablum and they think they're doing marketing or building their business with AI. They're not. They're just spewing more garbage out of their spam cannon with AI. What we're talking about here is creating a scorecard that you use as part of your marketing cycle to generate an actual insightful outcome for a prospect. You can hang it off your own website. You don't even have to be there. And what happens is a couple things. Number one, when a prospect goes through the effort of filling out an AI scorecard, that's what's called a signal, a buying signal. It means, hey, man, I'm willing to spend a few minutes here doing this. I might be interested in this topic. Very good signal. And if you build a legendary scorecard, as Eddie and Katrina are going to tell you how, you actually create an AI outcome based on a set of insightful questions that helps your prospective customer, your prospective client, your prospective community member, course participant, book reader, buyer, et cetera, et cetera. You give them something of value. You give them an assessment of where they are and what could be true. Remember, in category design, it's all about creating different futures. And an AI-generated scorecard gives a picture with data to your prospect of what the different future might look like based on real data, real analytics using AI.
Yeah. You know what I love about what Pirate Christopher says, more than the normal stuff, is that I actually think he languaged something really powerful, is that the scorecard, which is decades old, you could make a case that that is one of the original versions of artificial intelligence. Because really what that is taking expertise and putting it into an automated way that somebody else can borrow the thinking from somebody, some expert with it. And that, they have different names. So just think about those of you who've, kind of been a little bit longer in your careers, you'll probably remember back in the day, diagnostics we've talked about, scorecards. Anyone remember competencies? That was a huge thing in consulting for a while. And so whether it was Salesforce competencies, like how do you measure somebody, who's, I'm selling a product, a more consultative sale. HR has a lot of these on a spectrum, right? Where you're trying to assess somebody on a subjective skill. And you, in order to do that, instead of like Katrina saying, well, Pirate Eddie's like good or bad at this, well, let's create a spectrum on a particular criterion, and then let's dimensionalize it so that we can say, oh, okay, takes him, like one of the ones I used to use in my old consulting days was, how do you know if you should elect somebody partner or not? What I would always say is like, well, anybody who's smart can come up with the right answer if given enough time and given enough data and given a great team. Even someone not so smart can actually come up with the answer at that, right? The real challenge of a partner who has long-term sustainability as a thought leader and as a revenue generator and rainmaker is, can you come up with maybe not the answer, but a strong point of view that is different without any data, without any team, in 15 minutes or less? And just that spectrum, and then you can put in the in between stages for that. It allowed us to say, oh, you know what, this person's not quite there. So it allows you to assess people, but secondarily, it gives them practical feedback of something to aspire to move up in the ranks and the spectrum next with it. So, we've all talked about it, and that the serendipitous part, just to be completely honest, like this is not us being super smart or prescient, is that we were playing around with ChatGPT. Just to give the origin story of this, and Katrina will laugh at this, is that I was like, hey, strategy therapy, people write their one pagers. It's largely been a process where we give feedback through the live sessions, but as people submit them, I've been going through them and giving one-on-one feedback through that, which has been great. But at some point, we know that if this scales, it's going to be unsustainable. And so just to make it super clear about how we did it so that you can avoid our mistakes is that we went into it wondering, could AI actually replicate Pirate Eddie? So we gave them all the one pagers. We gave all my
So
feedback.
Eddie, I hate to interrupt you. I just want to make
Yeah.
sure everybody understands what we're saying here. So we have a program called Strategy Therapy, a course. And the output of strategy therapy, it's a thing people pay for. We'd love it if you did. We don't do enough marketing. We just fucking never sell our own shit ever anyway. Um, but the big output of this strategy therapy course is this thing called a one-page strategy. And the three of us worked together. A lot of it came out of over a year of working with our Category Pirates Academy members and students. And when we came up with this concept of a one-page strategy, it's incredibly powerful. But then, as part of the course, we all wanted to be able to evaluate these one-page strategies and give people feedback. But then we had this horrible thing happen, which is strategy therapy. The course became popular. And all of a sudden, and when I say we, I mean Eddie, had a lot of one-page strategies to evaluate, and it was too fucking much. So then Eddie did what smart knowledge workers who are moving up the value scale to be what most people are calling creative capitalists. Okay, they create net new knowledge as opposed to just deploying existing knowledge. He says, well, how can I use AI to essentially evaluate these scorecards, give good feedback, but at the same time, make sure it's high quality feedback, and he can review the feedback. He doesn't have to do the first pass. He can do the second pass, taking a shit ton of time out and hopefully increasing the quality of the feedback to the student. So that's what we did. We created our own ability to evaluate. Imagine a teacher grading papers. So these one-page scorecards for the strategy therapy students. And then we had this aha. And the aha went like this. Wow, this is powerful shit. Not just from us grading students in the workshop context, but what if we took this idea and married it to the marketing and sales cycle? Like we talked about, selling assessments. And so now what we're doing is we're opening up the kimono for you on how we created our own AI capability to evaluate our students so that it becomes a leaping off point for you and you're thinking about how to do this for your prospects.
Yes. But just to really open the kimono all the way, right? The using this as lead gen, yes, that was super smart. We came up with that yesterday in our jam set or whenever it was, right? But the original goal was this is the problem that me in particular I keep running into and I keep getting into trouble for is, can AI ChatGPT replace me? It's not able to do that just yet, which is I guess good, but we have given it that charter, it has not worked well. And that it gives us wonky stuff and in particular for strategy therapy, like we want the feedback to be valuable, we want it to be precise, and it's not just the tone, it doesn't get it right all the time, even though in theory we could keep uploading more content, it'll get smarter and smarter. And it was really by accident. I didn't ask it to create a scorecard and it wasn't on my mind. I completely forgotten about all of the stuff that we just talked about. And then instead of, or in addition to trying to replicate my voice and kind of my thinking with it, it said, well, here's a scorecard. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. So it wasn't something that I asked for. I was actually going down a bad rabbit hole, and then it showed a different thing. And that was that early ideation is really what we have found, strategy or AI to be super helpful at. It's because of the error rate and hallucination. We actually think the AI at this stage is much better early stage, hypothesis formation, new ideas, kicking stuff around, quickly running through data and this and that. And so you'll see that reflected in the scorecard. So it allowed us to say, oh, here's a scorecard. Maybe we should do something about that. And so we pivoted to taking, not just replicating one of us kind of giving feedback to, okay, let's actually create a scorecard. And basically what we did was we had dozens of one-page strategies and my feedback. We said, create a scorecard out of it. And he created a version of it. And as Katrina knows, we went through a bunch of iterations. Like, we went through was it 12 question one? We went through a 15 question one. We had different, so like you can imagine making it more complicated. And the aha, which is, all of us taking our own medicine, is that the simpler the scorecard, the better. Right. And that, the AI, because of the hallucination risk, you don't want it to be super complex. Now, and so what that means is, and not to get super nerdy about this, but if you think about a scorecard, there's a couple of dimensions, right? One is the list of all the elements, the questions that you're asking. So yeah, this is great as a framing. Is start with ideation, which is why the diagnostic is actually super helpful, because as Christopher knows, nobody expects the diagnostic to be perfect. It's meant to move you from I have no clue to I have some clue, right? And the belief is that if these people could create that smart diagnostic, then that can move on to let's work with them on that. So that's kind of the first. But the two dimensions on the scorecard: one, what are the criterion and questions, and how much of a spectrum are you going to use to ask that? And
The other thing,
yes or
if
no,
you've
or
consumed,
spectrum.
sorry, Eddie.
Yeah.
If you've consumed much of our work, you've probably read some of our work on radical generosity. First of all, it's a principle we just like. It makes sense. We think that successful business people, startups, companies should have the community in the world they operate in as a priority. And in specific, their super consumers as a priority. And the interesting thing about the native digital world as opposed to the native analog world is it's much easier to give things for free. And so it's important to underscore here, if you do this as a bullshit lead gen manipulation, customers will know it. There are a lot of hustle porn stars out there who have all kinds of gimmicks and all kinds of bullshit as ways to get emails, and they're all trickery and they're all garbage. That's not what we're talking about. What we're actually talking about is when you get grounded in the problem that you/your company solves, and you know how to articulate that problem and evangelize that problem, and you're the owner of that problem because she who owns the problem becomes the solution. And you actually deliver something of value to people that they can use whether they ever buy from you or not. In our case, now we're a native digital company, but we know that 90+% of what we create will be given away for free, and we're not getting fucking paid for it. It's built into the business model. And even if it's a quickie little post, we try to have some unique differentiated value, even if it's a 5-line post. But then when we go to do something like this, any kind of a giveaway, if you have you ever gone to a fucking major software company and filled out a form and gotten their PDF, gone to SAP and gotten their download on fucking carbidingulation? It's garbage. Nobody reads it. It's painful. It's like having your genitals attacked. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is something of real value, so that if a prospect goes to your scorecard, fills it out, and it spits back a set of answers, it opens up some new thinking for them. It fires them up about their problem and what could be possible solving it, whether they ever do business with you or not. Radical generosity is a legendary business model, and it's especially easy in the native digital world if you plan for it.
Perfect. Well, and I think Christopher laid it out. The ability to be radically generous with the scorecard is part of how it'll increase the odds that it goes viral and people share it, but also it's the way to generate zero cost leads into perpetuity. That's kind of our big belief here is for you with this. So let's get into some of the nitty gritty of how to do that. Now that we've talked about this is an accidental discovery for us, but we talked about the greatest use case for AI at this stage of the game is in ideation early stage, right? We talked about that. And what the scorecard inherently does is what AI is also quite good at, which is converting words into numbers. Because a scorecard, by definition, has to be numeric at some level. And that most people are, not everybody, but like some people are great with words, some people are great with numbers, few people are great with both. And the scorecard is a way for somebody who is a great languager to bridge into the numbers gap, and even someone who's a great numbers person to verbally write down or speak what they are trying to do. Now, on this one, you have a choice on the spectrum, right? So remember, I talked about two dimensions. One is the different criterion and questions you're asking, and then on what spectrum. Binary means the answer is yes or no. And the beauty of that is it's simple, right? And so if I ask, hey, which of the pirates here is Asian? That's generally speaking, a yes or no question and the like, right? Now you can also put it on the spectrum of if there's somebody who's, maybe I'm 1/16th, whatever with it, then that's a different thing. And the spectrum part does improve the aesthetics and the look and the feel of the scorecard because you're going to get a more variety in the answer spectrum. Don't get wrapped up in making it too complicated because if you can really your choices are I could have a lot of questions and criterion. I can have a lot of spectrum. The wider the spectrum, the harder it is to fill out. And the more subjective the spectrum, the more confusion you may create. That's the Christopher's point of you have a donkey scorecard and not a great one. Okay. Now, what we would suggest for number 3 is don't let I would say if you have a piece of intellectual property that you want to create a scorecard with, submit it and ask ChatGPT, Perplexity, create draft 1. That's a great way of using it. Or the second way to do it is to create sections for the criterion, meaning, so some of you may have read the Find a Bandmate mini books that we've been writing about, right? And one of the things that we did was we built a scorecard for how do you find a bandmate. This is a different one than the strategy therapy one. And on that one, really, the mini book started out with 5 big areas. Do they have a discerning ear? I'm blanking on the other ones. Is like, are they an idea builder? Do they? There's a couple of big buckets that we had, and we gave it that. And what we would suggest is write a first draft, give yourself 30 minutes, and just whatever flows comes out. Don't worry about finishing it, but give the AI a head start. You got to you can't just say blank sheet of paper, give me a scorecard. It's going to come back with nothing. It's garbage in, garbage out. But use it as kind of a way to kind of break up the flow. You start with an article or a blog that you've written, create a scorecard that removes the blank sheet of paper problem for writer's block, right? Give it a little bit to work with and then have it flesh it out. That's what number 3 is. Now, once you have it fleshed out, it's a great way to say, go back through and simplify this. Am I being redundant? Which we had a whole bunch of them in the Find the Bandmate one, right? Number 5 is now you want to test for variance, right? So, which is to say, is the AI going to hallucinate? If we create a scorecard and we said, human, you take it, and then what does the AI say? You don't want a whole lot of variance between that. And if there's variance, that means that there's probably too much subjectivity in the scorecard, or you need to simplify it further. So you want basically a human result to be pretty darn close to what the AI will do with it. Now, a note on that from a hallucination standpoint, you cannot overdo it on the value of the scorecard is not so much the absolute score, it's the relative score. What do I mean by that? Is sometimes ChatGPT or Perplexity, either one, you give it a scorecard, you give it the input, it gives you 1 score. Do it again 30 minutes later, it gives you a different score. And you're like, what the heck, man? Like you just gave me 2 different scores for the same input. You're the same, LLM. It does that, right? And so the real value of it's not the grades. Everyone here, probably a type A, you got to get off the grade. The grade is not the point. It is the feedback of like, well, you weren't so good here. Why don't you work on this so that the V2 or the final version, that's what you're looking for, is what I mean by the relative score. You want the score from the first version to the second or final version to go up because it identified areas where you could improve. And so don't overfixate it. So meaning if your first draft gets too high of a score, scorecard probably not super helpful. If your first draft gets you like a bagel and a goose egg out the gate, it might be too hard. You might be too tough of a grader with it, right? But again, the more you kind of play around with this, the better you kind of smooth out the rough edges with it. And then 6 is really about when you give it to somebody, and you'll see this hopefully in our stuff, is that you're managing expectations to say, look, there is an error possibility, so don't worry about that. This is how you use it. Use it as a feedback loop. Use it as a writing partner. Don't be like, hey, I got this high score and now my strategy is perfect. And don't be like, oh, I'm a loser because I got a lame score. Like it's all about the relative score and helping people to understand what the context is. And really, if you're using it as the 7th one around lead gen, um, sometimes when you are, whether it's a consulting business or anything else, it's like when you have a prospect who thinks they're interested, the scorecard can be a great way for them to be focused on, oh, these are the specific questions that I have versus a general, I think I'm interested in or not. Like it's a way to accelerate the conversation. And so the beauty of this, and Katrina did that wonderfully for ours, is that you want to take the scorecard and put it into part of your marketing flywheel so that you give it away for free, or be radically generous, as Christopher said, but then you put in the score, you're inviting people, they're giving you information, and you're using it to give immediate value back, but it's really an icebreaker, as if you were meeting somebody new. That's really the way to think about it. But if you do it right, it should be like, wow, I never thought of that. And so of the 2 dimensions, and I'm sorry to get super nerdy with this, but the criterion versus the spectrum, keep the spectrum simple, make sure that there's real variance in there, and it's not super subjective, but the real value is in the breadth and depth of the criterion that you're asking, so that you can ask the non-obvious things. And AI is actually quite good at that, of like, give it the non-obvious bit, and help me ask the things that are unconventional. So like in the find a bandmate one, I think Katrina, we were talking about like some of the ones around core values, not so obvious. Usually you think about a bandmate, you're like, is this person an amazing drummer, an amazing bassist, or on key when they sing? But the values that they have, these are also things that are super important from a bandmate perspective. And so, yeah, Kat's bringing it up here. And that, this one is a very different version because we have 100 criterion and we made it binary. It's yes or no. And yes, it's a little subjective, this and that with it. But then, this is about, what? There's so much variety of what constitutes a great bandmate or not, that it's better to keep it simple from a spectrum perspective, binary yes or no, and broader from the depth of different questions that we can answer. So like that's kind of the central choice that you have to make, of like, am I looking for breadth? Am I looking for depth within one? And then so there's no right answer for how to do that. Yeah. you you can you can probably do one for picking a spouse, actually, because we are also jamming on like the non-obvious ones. That's really where you get people excited. Like Christopher and I were just kind of joking about like, the this probably took me 2 decades to realize that I had the exact wrong thing, was that, having a partner or a spouse who isn't super impressed with you is actually valuable. Now, you don't want somebody who totally denigrates you, but like, somebody who is like, and people here know my wife and they're like, that's all cool. And Kristen is fine with that. But like, she's not super impressed with me about everything that I do, right? And that I used to think that was a bug, and now I understand better it's a feature. And that's the part about when you want somebody to say, this scorecard, not perfect, but you blew my socks off with this one question within that I'd never thought to ask before. And I actually thought the wrong thing. And when you blow somebody away like that, guess what? That lead prospect goes from cold to warm to hot.
And this is a very important thing to underscore. Remember, people don't buy solutions unless they have problems. The scorecard is purpose built to diagnose problems. And so the way we frame a problem is more important than the problem. Let me say that again. The way we frame the problem is more important than the problem. I'll give you an example. I'll go back to Clary as an example. If they say, hey, would you like some help with your revenue management, your revenue collaboration, and your ability to govern on revenue across the enterprise? People go, oh, yeah, that sounds like something important. Maybe we'll talk to you about that in Q2. Now, when they show up and they say, The average company has 48.7%, or excuse me, 14.8%, 7%, or whatever the number is, revenue leak. And revenue leak is a massive problem. It's the revenue that you've earned, but you can't recognize. It gets stuck. You lose it in the system. And so we have a revenue leak assessment that will help you figure out how much revenue leak you have. Are you interested in that? Yeah, I'd like to have that right fucking now. And that's the difference between framing a powerful problem in an urgent and compelling way and mamby-pambying about your solution. As we go to build the scorecard, as we think about the questions and the scores that will be yielded out of those questions, start with thinking, how do we want our prospect to frame in their mind the problem or opportunity around working for us? What is the mental scaffolding we're helping them build as they think about whatever the hell it is we do? And so the point being, the scorecard should help crystallize and create urgency around the problem / opportunity that you help your customers with.
Love it. And I'll give you another example. If you go to the next page, Kat, this is one that my partner Clint Carnell and I we built out for a business that we were running in aesthetics. So Clint and I are part of Gray Space, and we took over leadership for an aesthetics business in the U.S. And when we took it over, it had marketing as a percent of sales was 75%. And within 4 months, we cut it down to 10% and we quadrupled the size of the business. And it was techniques like this that actually drove that, because they were spending a ton on B2C lead generation, and which was way too far downstream, wasn't going to pay off soon. And so, a couple things for context was we realized this was a B2B to C business, not a B2C business, right? So that's kind of strategy change number one. Strategy change number two was they were selling on price. And we're like, no, this is ridiculous. You got to sell on value and benefits. And so what we did was we were raising the price of the device here. This was for a facial machine that when we took over the business, the average sales price, ASP, was $12,000, $13,000, $14,000. When we were done, it was 25 grand. And so how do we do that? Well, we created something called the pricing analytics tool. And what it was it was actually wasn't a Survey Monkey. It was a Google form that we created, which was, tell me about your pricing. So you would come in, you're like, I'm thinking about this, but I don't know. That thing was only 12 grand last year. Why are you charging me 25 grand? Well, take the survey and find out. And so what it would say is like, what do you charge for a facial? How many customers do you have? What kind of devices do you have? Tell me about how many treatment rooms. So we got all the information that a good salesperson would get in the normal conversation, but we got it ahead of time. So if you think about all of our writing around the category design scorecard, the fourth element is the data flywheel. Scorecards, an amazing way to kickstart the data flywheel, because the questions that you ask are the data that you want to get back. So we got all this information about what they were charging. And then what we did on the back end, and we can share more down the road if people are interested, was the Google form would lead to a Google Sheet, which would lead to a Google set of docs and slides. And so you'd fill out the form. It would literally populate a letter that was custom and automated to, so Amanda Plummer filled out the survey. You probably can't read the mouse font, right? But all is like, here's what you shared with us. Your business name is Rejuvenation and Med Spa. That's it. It says your business name is blank, and it would pull from the survey. So it was all automated, right? So you'd fill out the survey, took you 8 minutes, and then instantly it would kind of come out with this. You have 3 providers, one Geneo, your price is $175. And so what the analysis would do was compare their pricing versus the national, average, or the 50th percentile. And what it found was that their price of $175 was 12% lower than the median. And it's simple analysis that it could do. And so you can see the letter that it would generate, and it would generate charts on the right-hand side that were immediately usable for them. And so now, again, this is not the same as a 7-figure consulting assignment that I would normally do, Christopher would normally do, whatever, within the past. The beauty of it was so shockingly fast. You'd fill it out in 8 minutes, and in minute 9, you'd get this in your email. And that was kind of the thing that blew them away. And so now the beauty of it was not only did it give us a data flywheel, it was free, right? And they were kind of amazed that it was custom letters and a custom analysis for them with all this data. But it allowed the sales reps to have a very different conversation, which was like, you can kind of Jedi mind trick, like, don't worry about the price of the Geneo. Yes, it was 12, now it's 25. Let's talk about your pricing. Because if your pricing is too low and we can raise it, then who cares what we charge for ours? Because you're going to make 10x back on your device shortly and within a year. And that's exactly what happened. This probably generated about 500 leads for us. And my best guess is at least $2 to $3 million of revenue came out of this, and it was zero marginal cost to generate the leads with that. So just as an example with that.
The other thing about doing these scorecards as part of the marketing and sales cycle, particularly if you do them well and you actually provide value, they're the reason they're an ongoing flywheel of leads is because they generate WOM. So if your prospect has a positive experience with this, they're going to tell others. So in Eddie's example, the anestheticians start talking because what happened in the scorecard is they didn't give them a ROI, merely an ROI calculator for why going with the new gray space shit is valuable to them. That's cool. But what's really cool was they gave them an assessment of their business, independent of whether or not they're doing our kinds of facials or not, and where they rank pricing wise and value wise and all these other dimensions. And so the scorecard became a tool for the esthetician to improve her business. And in addition, to show her how, with the use of the gray space shit, their business could be further improved. So the point being, A, real value, radical generosity. B, the point of this, how you can go from 75% marketing cost to 10 and drive the revenue line up, which sounds insane, is to build your marketing around the greatest form of marketing that always was, always will be, always is. And that's WOM, word of mouth. And yet we continuously never see marketing plans, growth strategies focused on WOM. When you lead with a truly value creating scorecard like this, like they did at Grayspace, okay, for these anestheticians, all of a sudden you build a WOM manufacturing machine because not only did you create value, which drives radical breakthroughs in interest and ultimately purchasing, you also get people talking. And WOM is, was, and always will be the greatest form of marketing. And so when we go to build a marketing execution, which is what an AI scorecard is, we must ask ourselves, how does this marketing execution drive WOM?
Amen. I think there's a couple other things, but we want to save time for Q&A. I don't know if people have it as well, but for us, it was just I'm trying to think of anything else we've covered off with it. Yeah, but we're super excited about it. Just so that you know where we're going with it is, it was just kind of funny. Like all of you, probably like us, have forgotten about all the great outcomes and wins you guys have had in business. Like the moment we did this, like actually it probably wasn't until a few months into building the scorecards that I remembered, and largely because Christopher was like, oh, wait a minute, like all the different wins that we've had over the years of using scorecards, and the gray space example I'd forgotten about until like yesterday we did this and stuff. So my hunch is that if you all kind of go back through the annals of your career, that you will remember the scorecards, diagnostics, and assessments that have been very helpful, either for your business or for other businesses that you've seen, and that it's really, sitting down to write a scorecard from scratch is a bit like sitting down to write an article or book, like blank sheet of paper, but you probably have content that you can just load up in the ChatGPT. Hey, write me a basic one, or outline the structure and say, hey, help flesh this out. And once you get going, I found that hard to stop was kind of my experience. And then you can use it to edit and winnow it back. And then it's all about fine tuning and tweaking it. So like I think Kat, you talked about 35 hours on our part. Like now that we've done it a few times, I think it'll be much, much faster for us. And so our best recommendation for you all is to just get going on it. And for strategy therapy in particular, I think next up, Kat will probably, she's smiling, maybe not so happy. I don't know. But like the what we're trying to get to is one page strategy. That's the outcome. The outcome should be convert that into an AI scorecard for never ending zero cost leads. I mean, if we do that, then you guys should be super thrilled about it and it should be super helpful for your business.
We have a couple of questions, Eddie. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so one question from Jeff is, hi Jeff, is where do you source the data that you use in generating a scorecard? I'm going to give a generic answer to this is whatever the best, like whatever tool that you use, right? Or if you're using Google, use Google Docs. Like if you're using, we use Typeform for our surveys, so everything can kind of integrate into Typeform. Then you can use Zapier if you want to push it over and like automatically populate that in a Google spreadsheet, or if you use Excel, like there's just so many automation tools. And I would say use whatever works. We're just using whatever works with our current system, which is a combination of Google Docs and Typeform and Zapier Zaps to automate things. Um, Taylor shared, Taylor Wells shared that there's probably tools that will help you do stuff like this and create these things and maybe integrate landing pages. We haven't looked too much into that yet, but I think it's super interesting. And if anyone else has recommendations, go ahead and type them into the chat because I'm sure if there's other people who are using this, as we know that there's probably a ton of tools to help out there. But Eddie, do you have any other reply to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think tool wise, I know I'm behind the curve on knowing what the best ones are to use out there, but yeah, I mean, the best way to do it is to start. I mean, I think probably the strategy therapy one, the version that's out there now is not the one that'll be there next year, and so on and so forth, right? So like, yeah, just get out there, have people fill it out, and see what you get. And like I think for strategy therapy, we were fortunate to have dozens and dozens of input to use to try to work on it and test it out. But yeah, the best way to generate data is to create it. So
Awesome. Hopefully that answered your question. We also have a question from Briar. What's the tactical difference between a scorecard and a quiz?
yeah, I don't actually know. I mean, a quiz is another great word for it. Like it makes me think of all those Cosmo, Vogue magazines back in the day. Is your guy hot or not or whatever?
Those were
But
Eddie's favorite quizzes. Yeah.
right. They're always in the barbershop. Like, oh, let me fill this out. But like I think a quiz it's probably comes down to languaging. Like my reaction to it is the quiz is shorter, easier to take, and maybe easier to share. A scorecard feels more robust, and that doesn't mean that there's not room for both, but I think we have a 15. The strategy therapy is 15 questions. I think the find your bandmates 100 questions. 15 questions on a 4-point spectrum versus 100 questions that are yes or no binary. And so I can imagine a 10-question quiz that's yes or no. It's a Kickstarter with it. But my sense is a short one with a spectrum will be more helpful.
Awesome. Hopefully that answered your question. Let us know if you have a follow-up. All right, we have ones from Category Pirates. So there's another Category Pirates in the audience. You mentioned a lot about prompts and ChatGPT during the webinar. What are some examples of things you'd ask ChatGPT to help you develop? So we can talk through this, or we can just kind of show them the thread that we use
Sure.
to create the scorecard and then kind of talk through it. Let me pull it up for a second, and then you can start answering.
Yeah, I mean the prompts, as I mentioned, if you think ideation, like it's just a great thought partner, and so I'm building out a scorecard, read this, give me a first draft. And then, what we found is that if you think ideation, like some of you probably participated in like a professional brainstorming jam session, and back when, we used to do it, it was like, you'd go off-site to somewhere fun and you'd hire a moderator and you'd have all these kind of random exercises that are meant to kind of broaden your mind. Like, if Steve Jobs made a toothbrush, what would it look like, and how would that differ than if Elon Musk did it? Like, and or you'd, all these different kind of lateral thinking exercises that would be able to help you with that. And so, what I have found is that using it like that, the experience is you'll say, "Help me brainstorm this," and then it'll give you 10 answers. And usually, like, because you can't hurt ChatGPT's feelings, I think, you say, I hated these 9, but this one was good. Tell me more like that. And it's a little bit of that. Like, I think it's just throwing out ideas and trying to figure out how to make it more robust. There's probably more thought leadership that we haven't yet created, and that there's probably a scorecard expert out there who knows the answers of, like, what is better. It's the question before about a quiz or a scorecard. Should I have a short set of questions, wider spectrum, more extensive one, like, and it's probably for different use cases. And that, I think, as Christopher noted, like, if you're doing something kind of like on the cutting edge of B2B software, like something brand new that's very technical probably requires and would be helpful to have something in depth, because it's the journey of filling it out is as valuable as anything else and stuff. So I see Robin's comment here is like, yes, people love to self-assess. People are competitive. They love scorecards with it. So it's all good with it. So this is the example that we have. So we gave them, context and said, hey, you've read everything that Category Pirates have written, everything Christopher and I've done. Great strategy coach. We're trying to, you know, you, uh, this is strategy therapy, and then here's some files. So we uploaded the prior strategy therapy one pagers in the feedback so that they can mimic, right? Um, and so, we started out with kind of what's the table of contents of the feedback. And so, like, if you had, um, uh, probably the thing that it did very well was, let's say I had 40 different examples of feedback that I was giving. Actually, can you go back up, Kat? Like, it's okay, this list here. So what we did was like, hey, can you create like so we did it a couple of ways. So, and this 1 through 4 is all about converting words into numbers. And so if you it's helpful to think about it that way, right? Here is like pages and pages of words. Can you help me make them into numbers? Well, how do I do that? Well, the number 3, top 10 FAQ feedbacks, that was super helpful. Like, what is the most common feedback that I give? ChatGPT can do that really, really well. Oh, you keep saying this, and actually, it was, if some of you will remember, the journey was when we launched strategy therapy. We quickly followed it up with a mini book called "The Problem Is the Problem," and the reason being was that was the most consistent feedback that I was giving. Is like, too early into your solution and your POV. Tell me about the problem. Tell me about the problem. And so the top, if you are generating anything on a rote basis, like Danny, like this would actually be great for all of your principals and teachers. Like I can imagine for an AP Lang or Lit teacher or whatever, is like, take all of the feedback that I've ever given and what's the most common things that I get, right? And so you do that, and then you can basically create, a table of contents of what are the, different things that I say. Now let's synthesize the feedback. Do I give this feedback more to this type of people, this type of business? And you're kind of doing it that way. And so I think the first step is to, if you have a mountain of data that you're already sitting on, meaning words, convert it into numbers. Make a top 10 list like David Letterman. See if there's patterns of who you say to what and this and that with it, and use that as the structure to create the feedback. And then this is where I uploaded. And then, so once you create the feedback, we uploaded Rob. Thank you, Rob, for being the guinea pig. I don't know if you know that you're the guinea pig, but hopefully that's cool. We would upload it. And in part, I really liked Rob's first draft of it. I wanted to see kind of what would happen with it. And it will read his one pager through the lens of the initial scorecard. So, and it gave it some helpful feedback of amplify the emotional problem, differentiate the offer, da 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 da. And I was like, okay, this is cool. But then, it was, and then I compared it versus my actual feedback. So, you know, all you trained it on the stuff, and you said, here's ChatGPT, give me yours. Here's mine. Show me where there are differences and comparisons with it, right? And it was at this point where I realized, like, it's going to take forever and a half for this to be anywhere close to me. Not because I'm special or whatever else. I just don't think the reinforcement learning is quite there just yet.
It's
And
because you're
so
handsome.
possibly not. But yeah, it was one of those like, remember the replicating humans, not quite ready for that. But the scorecard, I was like, ooh, this will be actually quite helpful. So we work with Rob's thing. We added the new one. Keep going down, and then at some point, I'm trying to remember where the oh, okay, here.
This is where the scorecard came in.
Yes. So I said, look at the top 10 FAQs and now tell me, where you would agree or disagree with it. And then this is where I think, remember, we didn't ask it to give us, to create a scorecard. It just kind of did it naturally because ChatGPT, the amazing part of it, it's great with words. Remember that it is far superior with numbers. So if you can help it convert the words into some basis of numbers, e.g., a scorecard, it'll work way, way better to be more specific and to be more useful with that. So, like, I don't know if this is helpful to kind of see how the sausage was made with it. But once we saw that, I was like, oh, I'm asking the wrong question. Help me create a scorecard, not replicate my feedback.
And it goes on and on and on.
This was a long
This is like one of the longest threads I think I've ever read through in my life. But the point is that it was kind of just constantly, like you were saying, Eddie, you were giving it feedback, we were refining it, we were trying different things. Once we had the idea of the scorecard, it was saying like, okay, it's not right what I'm looking for. Here's what I'm thinking. So it's really going through. It's like what Cole always said, and always still says about AI is treat it like an intern, right? If it doesn't do something correct, you have to tell it that, and then you have to give it the prompt for how you would fix it, give it an example. You kind of have to be willing to teach it to go in the direction that you want it to go. I'm going to stop sharing this. And David also has a question. He said, have we run Category Pirate Substack through a scorecard, or have we used it to develop a scorecard for other creators who want to build something with similar success levels of Category Pirates? Eddie, take it away.
This was the $20,000 mistake I made. I will say that is that. Yeah, so number one, we tried.
What happened to all that money, Eddie? Eduardo. Where's the money, Lebowski?
You know what's funny? It went into the pocket of a very smart Caltech AI developer who gave us a bunch of code that didn't really do anything.
It didn't produce any result, but hey, he was a cute
strangely
kid.
Turned out to be weirdly important in a parallel universe because apparently that dude is on the Palo Alto City Council that made the news because he was like, oh, he's apparently connected with Tesla about letting them test self-driving. Anyway, random, long story longer to be. But we tried, David. It was too much, and the scope was too big, and we blew a lot of money on that. And so, like, number one, it only allows you to upload 10 documents at a time. I mean, I don't know if that's true of everything out there. So we have too much content. In particular, I think the niche down advice is the best one to do. Like, we actually, the original use case we were trying was to develop a content sommelier. If you like this mini book, you ought to read this one. It was too much. For as smart as GPT is, like maybe it'll get better, but I do actually think, one of the things that gives me confidence that AI won't take over our lives as humans is that great at answers, not good at questions. Humans are good at questions. And that it was really about us becoming much more specific. Like, forget the sommelier thing. That's too hard. Let's start strategy therapy. How do we automate the feedback? Oh, wait, let's do a top 10 list. Oh, wait, let's create a scorecard. Oh, wait, let's do that, right? And so I would say take one specific lane of content, make a top 10 list of the feedback around it. That's the data flywheel part. And then use that to create a scorecard. And then you can reinforce from there. So. Yeah, I mean, the comments in here are great. Like, there's probably some other technical ways. So your point about clustering analysis could be very helpful with that. I will still say, again, I'm not a AI expert or whatever, but my experience has been it's the scoping and throwing more technology. I don't think is going to help me, at least. It was about narrowing the definition of the scope, and it's the permission to play mini book. Cat was making fun of how long the thread was, just playing like, hey, this isn't working, try this, try that, let's go down that, and then voila, the door opens and like, oh, there's buried treasure down that way, and let's go see what happened there. So you never know what's going to happen in the playing part. I'm sure there are things, but like I just don't think it's super valuable. Like, or it said differently, we have learned we're not going to pay somebody to help us figure this out. We have to do it ourselves.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to answer this last question, and then I think we can call it a day unless anyone has any more questions. But yes, we will. Everyone will get a video recording of this, a transcript of the webinar, and then also the chat script transcript, because there was a lot of super awesome conversations happening on the side. And thank you, Christopher, for managing the chat. But we hope this was helpful. If you know anybody else who could benefit from the one-page strategy scorecard or just this webinar, feel free to share it with them. We're working on this for ourselves, and we're iterating and testing as we go, and we want to do it all with you. So feel free to share around and let us know. You can always email us at hello@categorypirates.com if you have questions or comments or need anything. And thanks everyone for being here. We appreciate it. And see you next time. Happy holidays.
Thanks, everybody.